It was on a quiet evening that Eleanor first found the mirror. She had been wandering through the narrow, twisting streets of the old district, where soot-stained walls and uneven cobblestones seemed to hold centuries of forgotten stories. Tucked between two crumbling buildings stood a tiny shop she had never noticed before. A faint golden glow flickered behind its dusty window, and above the door a weathered sign read, "Curiosities and Oddities." Drawn by instinct more than intention, Eleanor stepped inside. The air changed immediately. It smelled of cedar, lavender, and something older, like history pressed into wood and fabric. Shelves crowded the walls, overflowing with strange objects. Clocks that ticked out of rhythm, books that seemed to murmur when she passed, jars filled with liquids shimmering in impossible colors. But none of them held her attention for long. At the far end of the shop stood a tall mirror framed in dark, intricately carved oak. The wood twisted like living vines, and beneath the glass shimmered a faint, liquid light. Eleanor approached it slowly. The surface was impossibly clear, yet something moved beneath it, like light flowing underwater. She reached out and touched the glass. It was colder than the surrounding air. Instead of her normal reflection, the surface rippled. For a breathless instant, she saw herself, but not as she was. In the mirror, she stood straighter, wore clothes she didn't own, and smiled with a confidence she had never felt. The city behind her glowed with unfamiliar colors, vibrant and alive. Startled, she glanced toward the shopkeeper, a frail old man watching from behind the counter. He didn't explain. He simply nodded, as if she already understood. When Eleanor looked back at the mirror, the image shifted again. Now she stood in a sunlit room lined with books from floor to ceiling. Outside the window, cherry blossoms swayed in a soft breeze. The scene felt impossibly real, warm, vivid, tangible, yet it belonged to a life she had never lived. Over the following days, Eleanor returned again and again. Each time, the mirror revealed another version of her life. In one reflection, she was a painter, her hands stained with bright pigments, as a bold canvas dried behind her. In another, she was an explorer standing atop a windswept cliff, gazing over mountains and rivers stretching beyond the horizon. The mirror offered no commentary, no guidance. It simply showed her possibilities, paths not taken, futures that might have been. But the more she looked, the more those reflections began to follow her home. She dreamed of them at night. She could feel the brush in her hand, the wind in her hair, the quiet weight of a book resting in her lap. She woke with emotions that felt borrowed and memories that did not belong to her current life. A quiet restlessness grew inside her. Her ordinary routines began to feel thinner, less solid, as though her reality were only one layer among many. One evening, unable to resist, she pressed her hand to the mirror again. This time, it responded differently. The surface shimmered like liquid silver, and she felt a subtle pull, as though gravity itself had shifted. The reflection no longer looked flat. It looked deep, like a doorway. She understood with sudden clarity that she could step through if she wished. She could leave behind her current life and step into one of the infinite versions waiting beyond the glass. The possibility was intoxicating. To live in sunlight among books, to create art without hesitation, to stand fearless on a mountain peak. All of it felt within reach. Yet as she lingered, unease crept in. What would happen to the life she was living now? To the people who knew her? To the small moments that made up her days? Could she truly abandon her choices for a path that existed only as potential? Her hands trembled. Slowly, she pulled away. The mirror stilled, returning to its calm reflection. She realized then that the mirror's gift was both precious and dangerous. It allowed her to explore every path she might have taken, but stepping through would mean erasing the one she had. As she turned to leave, the shopkeeper finally spoke. His voice was soft, like the rustle of old pages. "Some mirrors are not meant for answers," he said. "They are meant for questions." Eleanor stepped back into the street, and when she glanced over her shoulder, the shop seemed dimmer, almost fading into the surrounding buildings. Months passed. Eleanor never returned, yet the mirror never left her thoughts. In ordinary moments, sitting on a park bench, walking down a rainy street, browsing the shelves of a quiet library, she felt the echo of those reflections. Every decision she made seemed layered with possibility. She noticed colors more vividly, listened more carefully, paid attention to fleeting details she once ignored. Sometimes she experienced a flicker of déjà vu, as if she were brushing against another version of herself moving through a parallel life. Late at night, she would close her eyes and see those alternate selves, the painter, the explorer, the reader in sunlight. But gradually, she began to understand something deeper. The mirror had never been about escape. It had not shown her better lives or worse ones. It had revealed the richness hidden within her own capacity for choice. Every path she glimpsed was born from the same source, her own potential. She began to treat her everyday life differently. She took small creative risks. She explored unfamiliar neighborhoods. She read books she once would have passed by. She didn't need to step through the mirror to experience change. She only needed to recognize that possibility was already part of her world. The mirror remained a mystery, waiting somewhere in the old district for another curious soul. Eleanor never forgot it. Sometimes in the quiet hours before sleep, she imagined she could see its faint shimmer in the corner of her room, glowing softly with infinite stories not yet written. And instead of feeling restless, she felt grateful, because she understood now that life itself was the mirror, a surface shimmering with countless directions, each choice reflecting another potential self. She didn't need to abandon her reality to live fully within it. The knowledge that other paths existed made her own feel more vivid, more intentional, more alive. And in that understanding, Eleanor discovered that the true magic of the mirror was not in showing her what might have been, but in reminding her that every single day held the power to become something extraordinary.